Have you ever stopped to ask, what was really here before Adam? Not just in the biblical sense, but in the depths of time, mind, spirit, and space. Could there have been civilizations, beings, or realities erased from memory before our written history began? Today, we're not just chasing myths, we're chasing the unknown. From ancient religious texts and mystical philosophies to quantum theories and forgotten civilizations, we're peeling back the layers of what many never dare to question. Was Adam truly the first? Or just the first in a long line of resets, rebellions, and revelations? This journey isn't about proving a single truth. It's about exploring the many possibilities, some accepted, others buried or banned, that challenge what we've been told about the beginning of humankind. Imagine a world where ancient watchers mingled with mortals, where divine breath met genetic design, where symbols whispered secrets science is only now catching up to. We'll trace Lilith's rejection of submission, the strange offspring of the sons of God, the cryptic ruins of the Indus Valley, and even the mark placed on Cain that may have echoed through generations. We'll look into the shadowy ruins of megaliths too precise for ancient tools, the idea of a gap in time between Genesis verses, and the possibility that massive catastrophes reset the human timeline again and again. These aren't just legends or fringe theories, they're questions that bridge science, theology, and the human imagination. From Gnostic scriptures to ancient Indian seals, from the Book of Enoch to cutting-edge discussions on consciousness, this journey is for thinkers, seekers, and wanderers. So, before we get into the specific stories and theories, ask yourself, is the truth of human origin buried in stone, encoded in scripture, or scattered in our subconscious memories? Stay with me, because what you're about to explore might change the way you see the past and your place in the universe. Lilith and the first rebellion. Most people know the story of Adam and Eve, but what if that story wasn't the beginning? What if someone came before Eve and she refused to be silent? Her name was Lilith. You won't find her in your average Sunday sermon, but in ancient Jewish mystical texts, the alphabet of Ben Sira, the Zohar, and later interpretations in Kabbalah, Lilith is said to have been Adam's first partner, not formed from his rib, but from the same earth, equal. And that's where the trouble began. When she refused to submit, to lie beneath Adam, she vanished, fled from Eden itself. In response, divine forces tried to bring her back, but Lilith chose exile over obedience. Her name was struck from the narrative, turned into a warning, a myth, even a demon. But let's pause. What if Lilith wasn't a villain, but a symbol? Carl Jung might call her the shadow, that part of the psyche we suppress because it threatens the status quo. Lilith is rebellion against spiritual conformity. She is the voice that says, I will not be defined by someone else's version of who I should be. Her story echoes in women denied agency, in marginalized groups throughout history, in every soul that ever asked, what if I don't fit the mold? And in a lesser-known but absolutely fascinating collection, Lilith's Cave, Jewish Tales of the Supernatural by Howard Schwartz, you'll find folkloric stories where Lilith isn't just a villain, but a force of power, sexuality, and autonomy. These stories challenge the binary thinking of good vs. evil, man vs. woman, order vs. chaos. Even more curiously, Kabbalistic texts speak of Lilith as the consort of Samael, the poison of God, hinting at spiritual oppositions that exist not to be destroyed, but to be integrated. Everything. Because if the very first creation rebelled, maybe humanity's origin isn't rooted in harmony but in tension, in choice, in refusal, in the power to say no even to God. And maybe, just maybe, the true beginning of humanity wasn't obedience, it was resistance. Sons of God and ancient mysteries. There's a strange passage in Genesis that most people skip over. But if you slow down and really read it, it shakes the ground beneath the entire creation story. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Genesis 6:1-2. Who were these sons of God? And what kind of beings were their children? Giants called Nephilim that walked the earth before the flood. Now here's where it gets strange. The Book of Enoch, an ancient Jewish text excluded from most biblical canons, expands on this mystery. It speaks of watchers, divine beings sent to guide humanity, who broke their oath and descended to earth. They took human women, taught forbidden knowledge, and bore hybrid children. Some call this mythology. Others call it forbidden history. Writers like Zecharia Sitchin took it a step further, proposing that these beings were not angels, but extraterrestrials, the Anunnaki, who engineered early humans as a hybrid species. Sitchin's work ties this theory to Sumerian texts and points to archaeological anomalies like Göbekli Tepe, a massive megalithic site dated to over 11,000 years ago that challenges conventional timelines. But what if this wasn't just about beings from the sky, but about consciousness? In quantum theory, observation changes reality. Thinkers like Deepak Chopra have suggested that consciousness itself might be multidimensional, that we might be part of a layered universe where perception and of reality constantly influence each other. Could the sons of God be higher forms of consciousness that chose to interact with the physical realm? In the lesser-known book From the Ashes of Angels by Andrew Collins, there's a compelling look at how these ancient myths of heavenly beings connect with real-world archaeological discoveries in eastern Turkey and Mesopotamia. Collins suggests that the Watchers might have been an elite priest-scientist class whose knowledge of the stars and human biology created early civilizations. So were the Nephilim the result of divine error, alien contact, or metaphysical consciousness blending with matter? Whatever the answer, one thing is clear: the Genesis story isn't as simple as it sounds. There are mysteries between the lines, echoes of something older, stranger, and much more advanced. Awesome. The Indus Valley civilization beyond scripture, where forgotten ruins whisper truths untouched by biblical narratives. This part blends archaeological intrigue with philosophical wonder, presented clearly, conversationally, and powerfully. While the Bible begins in Eden, the earth was already humming elsewhere. Long before Genesis was written, cities had risen and fallen along the banks of the Indus River. We're talking about Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, urban centers with grid-like streets, sewage systems, and mysterious seals, from nearly 5,000 years ago. Yet, despite their sophistication, they're rarely included in the conversation about human origins. Why? Because they don't fit the narrative. These cities show no signs of kings, empires, or massive religious temples. Their script remains undeciphered, their language unknown. What kind of civilization builds with such order, yet leaves no obvious trace of hierarchy? Historian Yuval Noah Harari in *Sapiens* touches on this mystery. He notes how certain cultures evolved with values that didn't mirror the power-driven kingdoms we usually study. The Indus Valley, with its subtle complexity, hints at a completely different kind of social evolution, one that may have prioritized cooperation over domination. Then there's the symbolism. The famous Pashupati seal shows a horned figure in a meditative pose, surrounded by animals. Some scholars link it to early forms of Shiva the destroyer and creator in Hindu cosmology. If true, this points to spiritual systems rooted in balance and inner awareness long before Abrahamic traditions emerged. Now here's where things get even more fascinating. In the lesser-known book Deciphering the Indus Script by Asko Parpola, the author connects the script's symbols to Dravidian roots, and suggests they may hold insights into lost metaphysical beliefs, ones that revolved around cyclical time, that spiritual rebirth, and elemental harmony. These people weren't primitive, they were just different. A civilization that didn't need monumental ego to prove its worth. A culture that speaks through clay, symmetry, and symbols rather than conquest. So, if we're asking what existed before Adam, maybe the better question is, what wisdom did we lose by ignoring civilizations that didn't write their truth in stone tablets, but encoded it in symbols and silence? The story of humanity isn't a single stream, it's many rivers flowing into the same ocean. You're on a roll, let's keep the energy going. Sethian Cainite duality, where we explore ancient tensions not just between brothers, but between worldviews, spiritual versus material, light versus shadow. And yes, this one brings in bold, underexplored ideas from Gnosticism, philosophy, and a lesser-known text that hits hard. Most of us know the tale Cain kills Abel out of jealousy, but hidden deep in Gnostic writings, that's just the surface of something far bigger, a cosmic split that shaped human consciousness itself. According to the Gnostic tradition, there wasn't just one origin of humanity. There were two currents, two seeds. One was Sethian, born of divine intention, carriers of spiritual light. The other was Cainite, born of rebellion and rooted in the material world. These weren't just people. They were lineages of energy, perception, and purpose. The Apocryphon of John, a lesser-known text from the Nag Hammadi library, paints this contrast vividly. It describes a world where Sophia, the divine wisdom, creates life apart from the true source, and in that fracture, material existence is born. The children of Seth carry divine remembrance. The children of Cain are entangled in forgetfulness. But here's the twist. Gnosticism doesn't frame Cain as pure evil. In some Cainite sects, Cain is actually honored. They saw his act not just as murder, but as liberation from divine control. Morality, in their eyes, wasn't black and white, it was fluid. This brings us to Nietzsche. In Beyond Good and Evil, he writes, "Morality is merely an interpretation of certain phenomena, more precisely, a misinterpretation." Nietzsche would probably say both Cain and Seth are just expressions of, well, neither divine nor demonic, just human. And then comes science. Modern genetics dismisses the idea of dual origins. All humans today trace back to shared mitochondrial and Y chromosomal ancestors. So what are we really talking about? Maybe not biology, but consciousness. Maybe the Sethian-Cainite split isn't about genes, but mindsets. The inner struggle between ego and essence, destruction and creation, forgetfulness and awakening. In the rare book, The Secret Book of John, also from the Nag Hammadi texts, we find the idea that the soul must remember where it came from, and that this memory is the only way back to the divine source. So maybe the question isn't, who are you descended from? But what energy are you carrying right now? Because this duality isn't just ancient, it's happening inside each of us. Let's push deeper into mystery, because next part is Ruach Elohim and the gap theory that takes us into the very space between the lines of Genesis. Here, language, mysticism, and cosmic speculation collide in ways that make you question the whole concept of the beginning. Genesis 1:1 is famous. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But the next verse, that's where things get weird. Now the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Wait, formless and void? If God just created the heavens and the earth, why is it already in chaos? The Hebrew phrase here is tohu wa bohu, chaotic, desolate, unstructured. It doesn't describe a fresh creation. It sounds more like something that was already broken. This is the crack in the text, where the gap theory begins. Theologian Thomas Chalmers, followed by the Schofield Reference Bible, proposed that there might be a vast span of time between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2 millions, even billions of years. Enough time for entire civilizations to have risen and fallen, erased by catastrophe. This idea doesn't conflict with science, it absorbs it. Fossils, ancient strata, mass extinctions all could have occurred before Adam during this lost era. But let's look at the spiritual side. The phrase Ruach Elohim hovered over the waters isn't just poetic. Ruach means spirit, wind, breath. And it's not passive. In Jewish mysticism, this is the divine force that stirs potential into motion, the breath before the word. Meister Eckhart, the Christian mystic, once wrote, "God is at home, we are in the far country." That space, the void, is the silence before existence remembered itself. It might not have been a blank slate, it might have been a recovery. And in the lesser-known book Earth's Earliest Ages by George H. Pember, published in the 19th century, the author argues that a pre-Adamic world did exist inhabited by spiritual beings who fell into corruption. Pember believed Genesis 1:2 marks the aftermath of divine judgment, not the start of creation. So was Eden really the beginning, or was it a restart after something went horribly wrong? Maybe the spirit hovering wasn't a calm presence, but a witness to a cosmic wound, waiting for the next breath to reshape the void. Let's keep unraveling the forbidden threads. Serpent seed and the battle of lineages is where Genesis, symbolism, and psychological influence intersect with ancient myth and dangerous misreadings. This one hits heavy, but it's also eye-opening. In Genesis 3:15, after the infamous fall in Eden, God says to the serpent, "I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed." Most read this as metaphor good versus evil, but some took it literally, proposing the serpent seed theory, the idea that Eve bore children from both Adam and the serpent. That Cain in this reading wasn't Adam's son, but the offspring of a darker lineage. This idea has been around for centuries, but let's be real, it's also been twisted. At its worst, serpent seed doctrine has been used to push racist ideologies, creating dangerous divisions by claiming certain bloodlines are inherently corrupted. And that's exactly why we need to talk about it with clarity, not conspiracy. From a symbolic lens, the serpent has always been a complex figure. In the ancient Near East, serpents represented wisdom, life, and transformation, not just temptation. Psychologist and mystic Joseph Murphy, in The Power of Your Subconscious Mind, explores how symbols influence us far beyond logic. He argued that our subconscious doesn't differentiate between literal and symbolic truths. What we believe, we become. That's how ancient stories still echo in our psyche. So maybe the serpent wasn't a literal creature at all. Maybe it was a symbol of forbidden awareness, a trigger for awakening, dangerous, yes, but also necessary. Because without contrast, there's no choice, and without choice, no consciousness. And here's something you won't hear in Sunday school, one of the most controversial texts in the Nag Hammadi library, the hypostasis of the archons, actually portrays the serpent as a liberator, helping Adam and Eve escape the ignorance imposed by the demiurge, a false god. Now imagine that. A completely flipped script. The battle of lineages, then, isn't about blood. It's about awakening versus control, curiosity versus obedience. Two seeds not in DNA, but in the soul. So let's be clear, the serpent seed theory, when misused, becomes poison. But when seen through the lens of psychology, mysticism, and symbolic truth, it reveals something much deeper: the primal tension between who we are told to be and who we are capable of becoming. Nephilim and pre-Adamic giants. Imagine a time when humans weren't the tallest beings walking the earth. The Bible, in Genesis 6:4, casually drops this. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. But who were these Nephilim? And more importantly, what were they? Some say giants. Others say hybrids, part divine, part mortal. What's strange is that this isn't just a biblical thing. You'll find giants across global mythologies: Norse Jotnar, Hindu deities, the Titans of Greece. Even Native American legends speak of massive beings who walked the plains before the tribes arrived. And then there's the Book of Giants, found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. It expands the Enochian tale of fallen watchers and their enormous offspring beings so destructive they caused the world itself to groan. Now you might ask, is there evidence? That's where things get murky. Stories circulate about oversized skeletons discovered in remote caves and deserts, often quickly removed or dismissed by mainstream archaeologists. Sites like Baalbek, with its impossible stone foundations, raise questions. How were 800-ton stones precisely placed before the invention of the wheel? These aren't isolated anomalies, they're uncomfortable patterns. In the lesser-known book Genesis 6 Giants by Stephen Quayle, you'll find a vast catalogue of reported discoveries, suppressed artifacts, and old newspaper clippings that document alleged giant skeletons, some over 10 feet tall, discovered across North America, the Middle East, and Asia. Critics call it fringe. Believers call it truth, with the volume turned down. But what if these stories aren't just about height? What if giants symbolize pre-Adamic forces, civilizations that didn't just fall but were erased? Maybe the flood wasn't only about cleansing sin, but wiping the memory of a previous age that got too powerful, too fast. And yet, they left fingerprints. Monuments too large to make sense, myths too consistent to ignore. Legends that whisper, "We were here before you, and we fell." So whether literal or symbolic, the Nephilim raise one haunting possibility. What if humans weren't the first to inherit the earth, but simply the last ones left standing? Two seeds theory and human duality, where science brushes up against Gnostic metaphysics, and the ancient question resurfaces: are we unified beings, or a cosmic split in human form? Picture this: twins born from the same mother, but with different fathers. It's rare, but it's real, a biological phenomenon called heteropaternal superfecundation. Two eggs, two fathers, one womb. One body carrying two legacies. Now imagine that on a spiritual level. That's the essence of the two seeds theory, an ancient belief that humanity carries two distinct lineages, one rooted in divine purpose, the other in corrupted intention. Not just different bloodlines, but different essences. This idea goes beyond surface interpretations of Genesis. It suggests that from the very beginning, there were two consciousnesses coexisting within the same species. That not evil versus good, but divided intent, the seed of awakening and the seed of resistance. And here's where philosophy steps in. When people see some things as beautiful, other things become ugly. When people see some things as good, other things become bad. Duality isn't a flaw. It's a condition of perception. So maybe the two seeds theory isn't about literal descendants, it's about the duality within us. The internal conflict between our higher self and base instincts, between purpose and pleasure, between soul and survival. But not everyone agrees. In modern science, genetics shows that all humans share common ancestry, which brings us back to consciousness. Maybe this theory was never about DNA but about spiritual programming. In the lesser-known but highly relevant book Forbidden Faith by Richard Smalley, we get a look at how Gnostic and dualist traditions carried this idea for centuries, quietly passed down, often persecuted, always seen as dangerous. Because if people started seeing the battle inside themselves, they'd stop looking for enemies out there. And that might be the real threat. Because whether it's Cain and Abel, Seth and Enosh, spirit and flesh, or higher mind and lower desire, this human duality isn't something to conquer. It's something to understand. The two seeds aren't just out there. They're within us. And the one that grows is the one we feed. Absolutely, now we journey into Cain's mark and the wandering tribes, where ancient symbols become social codes and the weight of exile stretches far beyond one man's curse. This one is about identity, alienation, and what it means to carry something you can't erase. After Cain murdered Abel, he didn't die, he wandered. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. Genesis 4:15. What was that mark? A scar, a symbol, a spiritual signature? The text doesn't say, and that silence has given rise to centuries of speculation, some meaningful, others dangerously misused. In early interpretations, Cain's mark came to symbolize divine mercy, a protective sign, even after punishment. But over time, especially during darker chapters of history, this mark was distorted. Some falsely used it to justify racial hierarchies, which is not only unethical, it's unsupported by the original text. So let's shift the lens. What if the mark wasn't on Cain's body, but on his psyche? In ancient anthropology, tribal marks, scarification, tattoos, body modifications weren't just art. They were identity, signs of belonging or exile. In many cultures, the marked wanderer was both feared and sacred, an outsider who saw the world differently. William Albright, a foundational figure in biblical archaeology, argued that Cain's descendants were symbolic of nomadic, pre-urban societies. In other words, they weren't cursed, they just didn't build cities, and that made them other. From a psychological perspective, Cain's story isn't about murder, it's about isolation. An escape from freedom. Erich Fromm writes, "The fear of freedom drives us into new chains." Cain's true punishment may not have been the mark, it was the existential loneliness of being untethered, unrooted, cast out not just from Eden, but from a sense of belonging. This echoes across cultures. In Native American traditions, in Sufi tales, in African myth, there's always a figure cast out from the tribe, marked not just by what they did, but by what they know. Knowledge can isolate as much as it frees. And in the lesser-known book Cain's Redemption by Dennis Shear, we see this symbol transformed entirely. In modern prison ministry, Cain becomes a symbol of transformation, a soul that can still choose a different path, even after doing the unthinkable. So maybe the mark wasn't a curse. Maybe it was a reminder that even in exile, you still carry the power to shape what comes next. Pre-cosmic catastrophe and lost civilizations is here. This part connects science, myth, and memory to explore whether Earth's history includes a forgotten disaster that reshaped everything before Adam, before Eden, before recorded time. Take a moment and picture this. A massive comet slams into Earth, not just shaking mountains but erasing history. Not metaphorically. Literally. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis suggests that around 12,800 years ago, a cataclysmic event triggered global fires, floods, and sudden climate change. Megafauna vanished. Sea levels rose, cultures collapsed. And if any civilization existed before that, it would have been wiped clean. Now, this isn't just a fringe theory. Evidence is piling up. Layers of blackened earth called Younger Dryas boundary layers have been found around the world. Nanodiamonds, iridium, and melted glass signatures of extreme heat and cosmic impact. This brings us to the question, could pre-Adamic civilizations have existed and been destroyed during this event? Writers like Graham Hancock and Robert Barville think so. They've pointed to mysterious megalithic sites Göbekli Tepe, Nabta Playa, Baalbek, even submerged ruins off the coast of India that suggest organized societies existed long before we were taught civilization began. And here's the kicker: many of these sites align with astronomical constellations, implying an advanced understanding of the stars. In Magicians of the Gods, Hancock argues these were survivors of a lost civilization trying to preserve knowledge after the fall. Even ancient myths agree. From the Epic of Gilgamesh to Mayan flood legends, from the Hopi stories to the Quranic tale of the people of Ad, nearly every culture speaks of a world-destroying flood, a reset, a warning. In the overlooked book Cataclysm, compelling evidence of a cosmic catastrophe in 9500 BC, by D.S. Allen and J.B. Dallaire, scientists and researchers argue that a planetary event reshaped the globe, shifting poles and birthing the myths we now call metaphor. But maybe they weren't metaphors. Maybe they were memories. What if Adam wasn't the first man but the first survivor of a reset? What if Eden was the last spark of order after the storm? We tend to think history moves forward, but what if it's cyclical, rising, falling, forgetting? Maybe what came before wasn't lost, it was buried. And maybe the earth doesn't just hold secrets, it's still carrying trauma from a past we haven't dared to remember. Let's bring it all together. So, here we are. We've questioned Lilith's refusal to conform. We've looked into the Watchers and their forbidden unions. We walked the silent ruins of the Indus Valley. We examined cosmic resets, symbolic marks, serpent myths, and spiritual dualities. And through it all, one thing becomes clear. The story of humanity is far more complex, layered, and mysterious than we've been led to believe. Was Adam truly the beginning, or just a chapter in a cycle of forgotten rises and catastrophic falls? Did giants once walk the earth? Did beings from beyond shape our consciousness, or did we simply awaken to what was already within? These aren't just historical questions, they're existential ones. Because when we ask what came before Adam, we're really asking, where do I come from? Why am I here? And what is the truth behind this human experience? And every tradition, every sacred text, every philosophical work from east to west, ancient to modern, whispers a different part of the answer. The Buddha reminded us that all things are impermanent, and the only constant is change. Prophet Muhammad, P.B., urged us to seek knowledge, even if it takes you to China, making curiosity itself an act of faith. Soren Kierkegaard, the father of existentialism, said, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." Maybe we're not supposed to have one perfect answer. Maybe we're meant to hold the tension between science and spirit, myth and metaphor, logic and longing. The beauty is in the search. The courage is in the asking. And if you followed this far, you're not just a viewer. You're a seeker, someone willing to question the framework, crack open the narrative, and explore the unspoken spaces between certainty and mystery. So don't stop here. Let these stories linger. Let the questions breathe. Revisit them not for answers, but for resonance. And most of all, stay curious, stay critical, and stay open. Because whatever came before Adam might still be alive inside you.